and welcome to a brand new episode of Happy Mum, Happy Baby, the podcast. Today we have two guests. They are a couple. She is a veteran of the army, having spent the last 5 years of her time there as their trans representative, and she got an MBE for it. That's incredible. He is a director, an actor, and a writer, having been in Colette and The Danish Girl. Gosh, it was right there on the tip of my tongue. And together, they are Britain's first trans couple to have a baby via surrogacy. I watched the Channel 4 documentary, Our Baby, A Modern Miracle. And honestly, I cried in it, and I just felt for you both throughout it. I thought it was so raw and so beautiful. Anyway, today's guests, we'll get into it. Today's guests are Hannah and Jake Graf. Hello.
Hi there. And can I say thank you? You're literally the first person who's ever interviewed us who's pronounced our name correctly. Graf. It's not Graf, it's Graf. And you are the first, I kid you not. So thank you.
Really?
Yep.
I was going through loads of different clips to find you saying it, because I know that any time that I'm on TV, I'm always Giovanna. My name's not Giovanna, it's Giovanna. But no, you know, once one person says it and they look for that reference of how to say it, you know, you're always going to get Graf.
Well, also it's the double F as well. Everyone insists, because of Steffi Graf, however many years ago, everyone double F's us. And I will not be double F'd because we are single F's. Thank you very much. Anyway, so thank you for that.
No worries. How are you both?
Hot.
We're good. It is very hot. It's 26 degrees still. But no, it's been a good day. We're looking forward to this.
Oh, good. How did you two first meet? I know this, and I think it's absolutely adorable.
So it's the story that I usually tell, much because I really sort of like to embellish these things. So Hannah and I were both, it was about 2015, December 2015. Hannah was obviously excelling, soaring in the army and kind of, doing her thing in the quiet way that Hannah does things. And I was acting a bit, writing a bit, directing a bit. And it was all going well, and we had family support and we had friends support, but we didn't have anyone to share our lives with. And so I'd seen Hannah being interviewed. She'd actually just been outed by the Sun newspaper, no less, for being in fact, at the time, the highest ranking transgender officer in the British military. And so obviously she was all over the front pages, saw her popping up on the Lorraine show one morning. And, Hannah came across as very shy, very humble, very sweet. And a couple of days later, she popped up on my Facebook People You May Know. And, obviously the trans community were fairly small, so we do all kind of know of each other. And I got a message
Jake, are you sure there wasn't a little bit of stalking that went on before that, so that she popped up in that? Or
you might be right. I had checked her out. That is true. I had checked her out. And so then she popped up. And when I requested her as a friend, she, in all fairness, got back to me within about an hour to say...
I think it must have been longer than an hour. There's no way it was an hour.
To say...
Hello, you're like, no, I played it much cooler than that. It was like an hour and a half.
I can assure you there was nothing cool about our first initial meetings at all. And she sent me a really sweet message just saying, been following your exploits and achievements with much interest. Be great to meet soon. Love, Hannah. And so I thought, well, obviously there is interest there. And so we started, it was Christmas time, you're all at home with your families and you're sort of having the odd drink in the evening. And so Hannah and I will kind of log on every evening and have the most mortifying Facebook flirtation, if you can even call it that.
Because on Facebook, you can scroll right back to the entire of your conversation. So you can just scroll and see the first things we ever said to each other.
It's pretty bad.
Oh,
it's pretty bad.
Terrible.
And so we started talking, and I kind of, I obviously wanted to get Hannah on the phone. And because Hannah's got quite a deep voice, and thought that if I spoke to her on the phone, I'd just hear a man's voice. And obviously I'd seen her being interviewed. I knew she had a deep voice, and Hannah suggested we Skype. And this was way before COVID, when Skyping and Zooming was de rigueur. This was a time when, to Skype before you'd had a phone conversation was really weird. And I was like, no, I'm not Skyping you. And she was like, no, please, please. Anyway, eventually I got my way. And we got on the phone.
Setting the conditions for the rest of our relationship.
And we got on the phone, and I said, we had a little bit of chit chat. And then within about 5 minutes, I said, look, I'm after marriage and kids. Is that something you could get on board with? And to Hannah's great, acclaim and kudos, she didn't hang up, and she said, well, yes, very nervously, that is something I might be swayed into. And, knowing that we were sort of on the same page, obviously Hannah had never ever dated before me, like literally never had a date in her life. And I dated quite a lot and had lots of relationships. And, for me, none of them had worked out. So I kind of went into it with little expectation. And arranged to meet her at 3:00 at Waterloo Station under the clock on the 30th of December. Obviously, never having had a date before, she thought that meeting at 3 p.m. was normal. I was just like, look, if it all goes horribly wrong, I can sack her off by 6 and go and see my friends. So I must admit, I did actually have the phone call that came at 6 o'clock saying, there's been an emergency. And I was like, no, we're all good here, actually. And we just clicked. I remember watching her under the clock for a couple of minutes before actually approaching her, and straight away, I'm not sure it's stalking when you're about to meet for a date, but like just watching her, and she looked beautiful and she looked shy, and I just immediately was attracted to her, which happens so rarely for me. And so we had this wonderful date along the South Bank in London. We talked about everything except being trans. It was touched upon very briefly, but once we started talking, we talked about music and families and hopes and dreams. And for once didn't have to talk about being transgender and dysphoria and, politics and all that nonsense. We just talked about what we wanted for the future and, what we could see and what we'd never dared let ourselves dream of. And we had our first kiss at about 8 o'clock in the BFI, which was great because that's sort of one of my kind of spiritual homes. And we were having dinner on the South Bank at 9. And by midnight, Hannah had dragged me to a private military bar off the back of Waterloo where we sat and snogged on a sofa and drank tequila with a little group of veterans, playing cards nervously on the table next door, these sort of 90-year-old vets who were like, what is going on here at our private bar, Alfred? And then we saw each other the next night. That night on the way home, Hannah actually called me and told me she loved me on the phone.
I might have had too many tequilas by that point.
And then the next night, 31st of December, I left my friends after dinner at 10 o'clock in the evening, and Hannah and I actually said to Hannah, come over to my place, and I showed her my films. So I sat her on the sofa, played her all my films, and Hannah ended up weeping. And I thought, if there is a cooler way to seduce a woman than that, then I don't know it. And we've been inseparable ever since.
That's amazing. Now, Hannah, what was that phone call like when you heard about kids? Because for you, kids were something growing up that you didn't think you were gonna be able to have in your life. And for me, it's a Friends reference. It's Rachel opening the door to that boyfriend who's not sure if he wants to commit, and she's in a wedding dress. It's that, But you've got Jake going, I want kids. Because obviously Jake's saying you were breezy and you were open to it, but for you, who had been closed off because possibly you just thought it wasn't going to be possible, what was it like to let that in?
Yeah, I mean, from Jake's perspective, I really respected him asking and saying it. You knew what you really wanted, and you didn't want to get into a relationship to get attached to someone and 2 years down the line to find out you're in a completely different space. And then, because I know people who that's happened to, and that's a really painful place to be. So, I kind of respected Jake for saying it in the first place. But at that point, it was still very kind of it still felt very pie in the sky stuff. Like I say, at this point, I'd never been on a date before because, as a trans woman, society, the media, everyone makes you feel so crappy about yourself. So they make you feel like you're so ugly and so unlovable that the idea that I could even go on a date or be in a relationship with someone was almost like ludicrous, let alone get married and have kids. So at that point, even though Jake, was saying it very seriously, I was like, yeah, I was kind of sure, I wouldn't be close to it, but it still felt like it would never happen. It was probably one of the reasons why I didn't balk and go nuts when he said it, because to me, it still felt very unachievable at that stage. But, obviously as we got together and started spending more time together and our relationship became more serious, then that's when I started just to open my mind up a little bit to think, oh, maybe these things are possible. And it was a slow build up to it. But yeah, looking back on it, it's a really hard thing to understand how someone can feel like that and how you can be in such a headspace that you think that not only that these having a relationship and families is unlikely, but almost like you really feel like you don't deserve it, which is a really sad thing, really. But so luckily, I found Jake and we found a way through it.
So at what point were you both, because obviously you have to decide we're ready, we're going to start looking into this. At what point did you decide you were ready? Because obviously it all takes so much time as well.
For what? For which aspect?
becoming a mum and dad?
Oh God, right. Well, I mean, I like to sort of prepare for things, and so obviously I did. I prepared a long time ago for the possibility of becoming a dad. After 6 years of kind of being in my medical transition, I actually thought, look, I'm 35. I want to give myself a chance to one day become a dad. And so I actually stopped testosterone use for 6 months and kind of let it all clear out. And then I went through the quite difficult and obviously very emasculating and, riddled with all sorts of difficulties and financial woes and stresses and so on, and had eggs harvested, which was obviously quite difficult. My mum, amazingly, who's supported me always, she supported me through that. And I was a single man going through this. When I went to the London Women's Clinic in Harley Street, they were amazing and very helpful and very open to trying with me. But they did say quite candidly, we've never met a guy like you. We've never had anyone like you come in and try and do this after 6 years on testosterone. So we have no statistics. We can't tell you if it's going to work, if it's going to take, if anything will grow. So, they were very frank with me, and I went into it eyes wide open, thinking nothing was going to work. And then it did, and it was a miracle. And I did 2 cycles and ended up with 5 embryos on ice at 5-day blastocyst, and thought, my God, I've got 5 little hopes, 5 little dreams out there. And they sat on ice for, I think, 2 or 3 years until obviously I met Hannah. So Hannah was very aware early on that we had 5 little hopes on ice. And as soon as we were married, we started our very, very difficult venture into the world of surrogacy, because as anyone who's sort of examined it or explored it or gone through a surrogacy journey will tell you, there's not a lot of information out there. The law is quite outdated now. There needs to be an update. There's been updates promised for years, but then obviously Brexit happened, and then obviously COVID happened, and I'm sure it's not anyone's massive priority. And obviously around the world, surrogacy is so difficult now. We learned so much, because obviously a lot of these countries where it was legal is now not legal for people who aren't of that country, places like India and Cambodia and so on. I didn't know that it was illegal in France, in Italy and Spain. So all of those people there have to go somewhere else. So it's either the US and Canada or Ukraine. And obviously Ukraine is pounding out babies, pumping out babies. I think around the region of sort of 5,000 babies a year are coming out of Ukraine. But at the same time, they won't touch LGBT people with a barge pole. And so, for all those LGBT people across places like France, Spain, Italy, and here, we had no option but to either stay here and do it or go to the US. And that was just, for us, it just wasn't financially possible. So we were very, very fortunate that we tried all the agencies here, and we spoke to a lot of people, and we went onto the Facebook surrogacy kind of Wild West, where none of it is regulated, and it's all...
Well, I've got to say, so I did something for Steph's Packed Lunch where we were looking into sperm donors, and I went to a fertility clinic, and it's crazy what you can find on Facebook. You know what I mean? Like, but on the one hand, you're just like, well, these people just want to help people get pregnant because that's what they really, really want. Yeah. But you're right, that because there is no regulation in that sense. Yep. It's amazing what you can find on Facebook.
It shows the best of social media and the worst of social media. So the best of it is that you are connected to people. So you can find people on Facebook who you can pair up with and have this most incredible journey. That's the best bit, is you can connect to people across the world instantly through your laptop, through your mobile phone. The worst bit is that there are nefarious people out there who try to take advantage of it. And that is where it gets scary, especially when you're talking about surrogacy, because it's not just, the money, it's the emotions that are on the line. People who are going through surrogacy are doing it because...
So vulnerable, which is, the first thing. Anyone who knows what it's like to want a child, you know that you are quite often, by that point where you're having to look at surrogacy, desperate, vulnerable, you would do anything. And obviously people will always abuse when people are in that situation.
Yeah, and it's the same for potential surrogates as well. Again, they're putting themselves in a very vulnerable position, and they do it, I mean, I think anyone who puts themselves there as a surrogate, is an amazing person. It's such a altruistic and incredible thing to do for someone, as we can attest. But again, you're putting yourself out there in quite a vulnerable way. And so, you in the UK, you're stuck between kind of either doing it, off the record through Facebook, by meeting people, and you're opening yourself up to all of that, or you have to go through agencies which suddenly come into lots of fees, lots of waiting lists, and it becomes very challenging. And so it's really difficult to navigate your way through that, and there's no one really to help you do it, is there?
I mean, we were very lucky that we met lots of people who'd either gone through surrogacy, were about to go through surrogacy, who were running some of the Facebook groups. You know, we really we learned a lot in a very short time. But what we did also learn is that, as Hannah said, there are a lot of people out there who are preying quite literally on the vulnerability of people like us who are at this point willing to do anything. You know, and in all fairness, we didn't even wait that long to find our surrogate, to find our wonderful Laura. You know, we went to an agency, we went online, we met lots of people, and then we actually were being interviewed on Lorraine about something totally different and happened to say, yes, actually, we're looking for a surrogate. And got loads of women all of a sudden messaging us on Facebook, which was great. One, quite sadly, I think, actually offered us a baby. And I think they were having a really tough time. They said, please take my baby, which we sort of ignored that. Yeah. But we had lots of lovely women just saying, you know, I've always wanted to do this, and, you know, I've had my own family and I'm all set, and please let me help you. So, you know, we chatted to all these women. Some of them dropped out for various reasons. Their husbands weren't up for it. They weren't quite ready. They hadn't thought about some of the ramifications. And then eventually we found our wonderful Laura, who just said, you know, she had always wanted to be a surrogate for 12 years. There had been a time when she was going to have a child for her sister, and her sister then miraculously got pregnant, and she'd always held on to that. I would love to do that for another woman, for another parent, and to give that gift, that ultimate gift, to another family. And her husband at the time hadn't been very open to that. And at the time we met her, they were in fact getting separated anyway. And apparently one of the first things she wanted to do when everything kind of fell apart was become a surrogate. And it just was the perfect kind of aligning of, wow, we found you, you found us. And, you know, much to our amazement, I think, again, because of all the sort of terrible media transphobia at the moment, we were absolutely blown away that anyone would want to do that for us. And I think when we had the conversation with Laura after knowing her for about sort of 3 or 4 months, and I think we were equally nervous, weirdly. We were so desperate for her to say yes, and I think she was quite desperate for us to say yes. And so
it must be so weird. I mean, talking to each other online, or, you know, but actually going to meet each other, it's like a first date, but so much is resting on it. So as much as you're going there going, oh, gosh, we hope that we like her. We hope that, you know, her everything about her aligns with us. You're also going there going, I hope she likes us, because I hope I don't come off as a tit, because otherwise, you know, then she won't want to be our surrogate. So you must be so nervous going into that meeting.
Yeah, but we honestly, the conversations that we had to have very early on about things that we'd never thought about, whilst obviously you're drawing up the surrogacy agreement, things like what would happen if you both died whilst the baby was in the womb? You know, who would have the baby? What would happen if there was something wrong with the baby in the womb? All of these conversations that you have to have that you'd never thought about. You know, what an awful thing to have to discuss with my wife. You know, what if we both died and our baby was still inside Laura, and what would happen to her, and how would that all happen? And, you know, drawing up of wills and so on. I mean, there was some quite sobering and quite depressing, really, talking about us both dying, quite depressing moments. And then, you know, obviously we're talking to family and friends about who'd have the baby, and, you know, getting some funny reactions about that. You know, a lot of people were sort of, yeah, of course we'd have the baby, no problem. But a lot of people were kind of a bit like, ooh, I don't know. And then you get a text later on that night saying, yes, of course we'll have the baby, for God's sake. So it was...
Which is probably good, though, that, then they've really thought about it. They've not just gone, yes, definitely, you die, I get a baby. Thumbs up.
No, you are absolutely right. I mean, it was just, you know, I think we really had to think things through, which is good, because my God, you have to think things through. And, you know, we had to have these conversations with Laura. I mean, the number of times I've had to discuss Laura's menstrual cycle with her. And I every time I go, oh God, and Laura's like, oh, you hate this, don't you? And I'm like, yes, I hate talking about your period. Yes, Laura, that is absolutely accurate. But, you know, we all became so close because obviously, you know, not only did we go through all of those conversations, but then we went through a pandemic together. So, you know, we were fairly solid. And the fact that we managed to bring Millie safely into the world in the middle of all that is nothing short of miraculous.
So what was it like going back to the moment that your egg was placed inside Laura? So you were both there. what would I've had friends who have gone through IVF and they've said that moment is pure magic, because you see the embryo on the screen, you know that is life right there. How was that?
I mean, it was genuinely incredible, and like I say, apart from the fact that obviously Laura's there, who is there with legs akimbo. It's kind of it's a little bit awkward, but we got to see that moment, and it was amazing. The thing that I will always remember though is afterwards,
Mr. Neurosis here.
Yeah. Mr. Neurotic decided to freak out because he thought that as the tube came out and he saw some lubrication flick across the room.
Liquid flicked across the room, and I just thought, oh my God, that's our embryo now stuck to a wall. I mean, literally, it came out and it just went, whoop. And I was like, well, and she was going, it's there on the screen. I was like, but you don't know it is. You don't know. That could just be liquid. And so I came out and I was going to Hannah, how do we check? Can we just put another one in? Hannah, can we talk to them? And Hannah was like, well, for God's sake, would you calm down? So all the way home, I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And then obviously you have the longest 12-day wait ever, where you're just kind of, every night I went to bed, we had little effigies, we had magic unicorns, because we call ourselves Team Unicorn, as a lot of surrogacy teams give themselves names. So we had we'd rub our unicorns, we'd rub our little baby bib that we had, we'd rub, we'd rock, not as in rock, but we'd, rock together and, hope and put things out into the universe. And then when we had that Zoom, that Skype, it was Skype at times, before Zoom had kicked off, and we had a Skype with Laura, and she had waited and she got this thing out of the wrapper.
So she'd taken the test and then put it back in the wrapper so that she'd not seen it, so we all found out together.
And honestly, that was to be totally honest with you, being in the room with a lady with her legs spread as this was all going on, for me, I have to say, didn't really do it for me. Call me crazy.
Okay.
However, when she sat there and she kind of pulled it out and I saw the 2 lines and I went, what does that mean, Laura? What does that mean? And she said, well, 2 lines. Pregnant. And I was like, no. Laura, look at it. And she looked and she went, yeah, it's pregnant. And I went, can you go and do it again, please? I hope you're getting I hope you're getting an idea of my personality here. And so she quite literally took it off to the loo, came back, and then we had a really awkward 3 minutes
of small talk. Yeah.
So, breakfast this morning, good? Yeah, great. Oh, nice day, isn't it? And then she went, yeah, it's still pregnant, and we were like, woohoo! So it was great.
No, we weren't woohoo. We were.
I burst into tears.
Yeah, there's the amount of time and energy, money, emotion had gone in to getting to that point, and the stakes are high because unlike with other couples, say we have 5 embryos on ice, we don't actually have any way of creating any more. So it was a case of 5 goes, and the IVF chances are not particularly great. They go wrong as often as they go right, and so stakes were so high, and I just felt this kind of like outpouring of emotion, like I just run a marathon, and all of a sudden oh my God. And then it was kind of having to pick ourselves back up after that and then get on with your day. But it was...
Well, the fact that we also had a camera crew for the whole thing pretty much, which, at the time when we sort of, agreed to do... Well, actually it was something we wanted to do because we know how little understanding and knowledge and acceptance there is for both surrogacy and for transgender people. And we thought, well, maybe we can put out something that might make people think twice about both and maybe be a little bit less judgmental about both. But then, we're both fairly private people in a weird way. What we put out there is very curated, as we all know. That people put out what they want to put out, unless you're, the Osbournes and you've got cameras in every room. But
Talk about a dated reference.
But it became...
We're all there, it's fine.
Everyone will find the Kardashians, whatever. But I think we realised quite early on that what we were doing all on camera was actually really difficult and really there are moments where, God, you just didn't want it there. And, going to the surrogacy shows and going to the NCT classes and going to all that was quite fun. But then when it became, the first scan and then the second scan and then, is there going to be a heartbeat and all these things that, quite frankly, you don't want anyone there. You're so, you're both kind of like a cat on a hot tin roof, and then you've got a camera there.
So throughout the pregnancy, how did you both stay in touch with Laura? Was she messaging every time there was not every time there was a kick, but when things were happening, was she letting you know? And how was that, knowing that was happening away from you? Your baby is growing. somewhere else, and you're not there to see it all happen?
Really difficult. But it was, it's tough because this, as Hannah said, felt like the highest stake thing we'd ever had going on in our life. And we were however many thousands of miles away.
But we did, we flew out to Belfast for all like the key appointments. So for 7-week scan, was it 16-week scan? 20-week scan. So we went out there when we could. But then, the problem is that you become a little bit imposing as well, because, you can't just fly to Belfast for like a half an hour kind of appointment. You kind of get there in the morning, and then Laura feels that that she's got to spend some time with us, but she's got her own life, her own kids or whatever. So it's a bit of a dance. But
and there's also how often do you call? Hannah and I would sit so many nights. Should we call her? Should we not? I mean, I don't know. We've already called her. We called her yesterday. Should we call her again? But maybe she wants us to call her. Maybe she doesn't want us to call her. But maybe. I mean, honestly, you're sending yourself mad.
Yeah.
And Laura is the most laid back person and was quite chill. Anytime we called, she was like, "No, it's fine. No, it's fine. No, it's fine." And just everything was easy with her. Until obviously it got to the pandemic, and then everything was hard across the board.
At that point, what was going through your minds?
Terror.
When you can see things are starting to shut up, essentially. People are no longer going to their offices, schools are closing, you know that travel is going to be restricted. So at what point do you call it and say, let's just go?
Well, we were, as you say, things were just starting to get a bit nervous. This was around kind of early March last year, where people were just starting to cotton on that this might be a serious thing that we need to really consider. And then we watched Boris Johnson's announcement of the first lockdown. It was on the 24th of March. I know that because it was the day before my birthday. And he basically said, that's it, we're locking down. And I looked at Jake and I said, we just got to go, because we don't know if we can make it tomorrow. So I literally called my boss and said, I won't be in work tomorrow. And we packed a car that night. And the next morning we just drove to Belfast. We just chucked it all in the car and we went drove up to Holyhead, got the ferry over to Dublin, and then drove up from Dublin to Belfast. So we got there at 1:00 in the morning on my birthday. We got ourselves a last minute Airbnb before they started taking bookings, and we just camped out there. We were there for about a month, weren't we, before she was born? So
which was really weird, because obviously again, I think anyone who's gone through surrogacy will know that you make so many plans about the birth, and it's one of the things you do before you even do the embryo transfer. You talk about who will hold the baby first. You talk about who will do the first skin to skin. You talk about whether or not you want breast milk. You talk about all of these things.
You're going to be there in the room.
Yeah, if you're going to be in the room, all of these things that you plan meticulously, you agree upon, and you know that that's the way it's going to happen. And then obviously COVID, just all of that just went down the drain, and all of a sudden it was, well, you're not going to be able to be in the room. And then it was, well, you're not going to be able to be in the hospital. And then it was, well, you're probably not even going to be allowed in the car park, because, they just want as much space and as much distance as possible. And, that in itself is scary. Then obviously we were told by Laura that if either of us contracted COVID, social services would not let us take Millie, which obviously makes sense. But the terror that you then feel, that added terror, not only are you scared of getting it, but you're scared of getting it because then you wouldn't be able to get your baby.
Yeah.
And it's not just we not being able to get our baby. Then, because in the UK, under UK law, when a baby through surrogacy is born, the surrogate mother is the legal parent of that child. And so when she was born, she was technically Laura's daughter. And then if we got contracted COVID and couldn't take her, then the only person that would be able to look after her was Laura. And then Laura all of a sudden has to look after a newborn baby, which she didn't sign up to. And also, she's doing this altruistic thing, but to give birth to a child and then to look after them for 10 days, for 14 days or whatever, suddenly it kicks off a bonding process that is like what no one wants at all. So it just felt like super high stakes, because we got out to Northern Ireland, but then we were like, we just can't leave this house. And we'd go covered up to supermarkets, and we'd meticulously clean every single thing with disinfectant.
If you'd put a match to us, we would have got up in flames. We were literally dousing with this stuff at a time when it was sold out of all the supermarkets. Everything was sold out. Loo roll, eggs, and hand sanitizer for some reason. So we were just going nuts with this stuff. Whenever we'd see it, we'd buy some. And we were, as Hannah says, barely going out. She'd go for a run in the Glen in the morning. And we go out to the supermarket once a week to get stuff. And obviously you're really, it was a time when we would come back and wipe every single packet of noodles and cans of, everything, because no one knew,
No.
We did not understand how contagious or infectious or what this was actually going to lead to. And all you were seeing on the news was pictures of Italian hospitals and people our age and younger lying face down on ventilators. And honestly, until that baby came out safely and healthy, I think I kind of held my breath for 9 months. And when she was cut out effectively at 5:30 in the morning on the 14th of April, legs akimbo, blood everywhere. That was, I think, the first time I kind of went, oh, thank God, in months and months and months.
So had Laura gone into labour, or was it an emergency C-section? Did you know what was happening, or was that at 5:30, wake up in the morning, kind of what?
No,
parents?
not that bad.
So she was. So the hospital decided to induce her on her due date, which was the 12th of April, and so she'd gone in for an induction. And this is what, again, learning process massively. You think of induction, you get induced, there's a baby born, but no, induction can take. I remember one of my best friends, actually my maid of honour, said it to me, I got induced, these things can take a really long time. You go back home and all the rest of it.
It was all a week, and we were, the reason they'd induced her on that day was because they wanted her in for as little time as possible because of COVID, and because they literally wanted her in, out. We would come in, grab and go, and obviously, it didn't turn out that way at all.
No, so I remember I was on a run, because again, just trying to, burn off some, nervous energy, and I was halfway up a hill when I got a message a call from Laura saying, I've just had, contractions, being told to go into the hospital. And I, I think I called Jake, and I went, it's happening.
She's coming. So I was like...
sprinting home as fast as I can, only to find out that, again, there's still a lot of waiting to do. And like I said, at this point, it'd been cemented to us, we weren't allowed in the hospital at all.
Yeah.
And we were told not even to come to the car park. So one of Laura's good friends, was her birthing partner. And so she was great. She joined us on WhatsApp, and she was kind of keeping us updated. And she actually was in the car park waiting until just the moment she was going to give birth.
Right.
And then eventually, after basically 48 hours of labour...
It was more than that. So she was induced on the Sunday, her waters broke on the Monday at about 4 o'clock, and it was on the Tuesday morning at 5:30 a.m. that finally baby and Laura were both tired and in distress, and they said, right, emergency C-section. And I think they actually texted to ask if we were okay with it, didn't they? I think we got a text to say, are you all right with this?
Yeah.
And of course we said, my God, of course, just so long as everyone is safe, do whatever you need to do. And I think that's also testament to kind of how amazing Laura was to actually even send us that text via Gillian, her amazing birthing partner, to say, are they okay with this? And of course we were okay. And thank goodness it was a successful C-section. And it was at that point we got a text saying, right, she's out. And we
just said, she's here.
Yeah, she's here. Accompanied by some of the most horrific photos you will ever see of a baby. The blood was everywhere, and she was screaming.
It's like a horror movie.
But honestly, just the relief. And so we very quickly got dressed and jumped in the car and drove the 15 minutes, which was stunning, because we were driving as the sun came up over fields of green and knowing that our baby was in the world, swaddled and waiting for us. But then, of course, we get to a hospital that honestly did not look dissimilar to the hospital 28 days later. There was yellow tape everywhere. It was absolutely deserted. The car park was mostly cordoned off. There were no one in any of the receptions, and we went in kind of looking for anyone who would help. I called the ward that we had the number for, and this obviously very, very busy, rushed off her feet nurse. They had a case of COVID in the labour ward. And she said, I can't tell you where the baby is because you're not the legal parents. So you can imagine, you're in the car park, we're both nearly in tears. The baby had been born, an hour prior to that. And this woman's literally saying, you're not her legal parents. I can't give you any information as to where she is. I'm sitting here with the mother now. So we're like, well, if you're with the mother, and I actually said, I'm with the mother in the car. And this woman was obviously very unimpressed. And we then finally got a message from Gillian about an hour later saying, right, come up and I'll let you into the ward. So we kind of went in and then we couldn't find, anyway, long story short, it was 9 o'clock before Millie was wheeled in Laura's arms, and Laura looked knackered. And we had actually had this conversation that I would hold her first and have the first half hour of skin to skin, and then Hannah would hold her and have the second half hour of skin to skin, and then we'd go out to the pub for a drink. And we literally, she came in and she was...
That didn't happen, by the way.
No, there were no pubs, obviously, because it was lockdown. But our baby was tiny and covered in blood, and we just both held this tiny little thing and just...
You had her on your chest and she had hiccups.
And it was a dream come true. There was just nothing like that. And the NHS were amazing, considering what was going on and considering that most of the hospital was closed and there was a case of COVID in the maternity ward. We were allowed our own little room, the three of us, and we stayed probably till about 6 in the evening, and they kind of talked us through how to bathe her and change her and feed her. And, she was drinking these tiny little bottles of, one sip, and you're just, and it was perfect.
I read somewhere, I can't remember which one of you said it, but you said that parenthood is something that you didn't dare to dream about because it seemed something that just might not happen. With that in mind, what's it like to look at your life now?
When I came out as trans, I thought I was making the decision that would mean that I never had a relationship and I'd be single for the rest of my life, and that, that I'd grow up, watching my friends and family have kids and I would be alone. That was okay, because at the time that's what I wanted, because I just needed to be me and that's who I was. But now to have come through that and be here with Millie, it is unimaginable how lucky I feel and how lucky I think we are as a family. And there are many people who struggle to have children and some who unfortunately don't manage it, and I have huge amounts of sympathy and love to those people, because I just know how lucky we are to have Millie in our lives.
So if you could write a letter on parenthood, who would it be to and what would you say?
I would write it to my younger self and to anyone who doubts their ability to become a parent. And I would just say that no matter how society or people make you feel, you are a human being, you have the rights, you have the ability, you have the possibility and the hope of becoming a parent, because I wish someone had done that for me when I was a little bit younger.
For me, I would write it to all of those parents out there who have a child who has told them, probably taking huge amounts of bravery and courage, that they feel different, that they feel that they're gay, or they feel that they've got a crush on a boy at school, or they feel that they're trans, or that their gender doesn't fit them, or they'd like to be called another name. I know what it's like growing up as that child, and I know that all you need is love and support from your parents. And having seen all of the young kids through all the different charities of which we're patrons being supported compared to those who aren't supported, all you need to do is love and tell your child that it's going to be okay. As a parent, you signed up to having maybe a gay kid, maybe having a trans kid. It's unlikely, because statistically that's just the way it is. But if you do, then you're blessed, because this child has trusted in you enough to tell you how they feel and who they are. And, I always think, particularly now that I'm a dad, would you rather that your kid, aged sort of 20 or 25, says to their friends, I was so lucky, because when I came out and I was scared and I was worried and I knew that society made me feel like I wasn't really what they wanted, I wasn't the norm, but my parents made me feel loved and accepted and supported. And because of that, I now am strong and I don't doubt myself and I have self-confidence and I'm so lucky. Or would you rather be the parent of a child who said, when I came out, my parents made me feel unloved and unsupported and invalid, and those relationships are ones that we have yet to heal, because they just weren't there when I needed them so badly. And I think, if you any kind of parent in the world, please choose the former, because it's not going to hurt you, and I assure you it will hurt them.
What's interesting, I think, is that both of you growing up, you wouldn't have had those people to look to who were trans, who were going through life. Those role models weren't there. And just watching you two, listening to you, the love that is just so apparent, the way you talk about Millie, you both talk so much actually about the fear, people fear the unknown. And you're humans who have so much love to give. And it is just such a joy to watch you and listen to you talk.
Thank you. That's very kind. Actually, the problem is with the trans community is that, like, I think it's something like 89% have never knowingly met anyone trans. And people, as we all know, fear what they don't understand and fear what they don't know. And, you know, Harvey Milk in 1980s San Francisco, when he was rallying people towards gay rights, said, you know, look to your postman, look to your brother, look to your friend, and you will see one of us. And obviously, you know, there are a lot of gay people out there and not so many trans people. And obviously it is difficult because, as you say, talking to us and talking to all our trans friends, and we are, as you say, human. We are just the same as anyone else, and we have all the same hopes and dreams and everything else. We just happen to have a condition that is something that usually needs to be kind of, you know, sorted, rectified with hormones and surgeries. Other than that, you know, and there are a lot of people that need surgeries to kind of, you know, make their bodies fit and align and work in the way that they're intended to. So, you know, for us, we've been very lucky. We've had largely huge amounts of support, and we would never pretend otherwise. When our documentary came out, Hannah had, I kid you not, thousands of messages from women, all of which she tried to reply to. I'd go in at like 2 in the morning, you know, 2 in the morning, she's still sitting on the sofa, scrolling through and answering these women. I was like, baby, you cannot answer every single message, but such beautiful messages of women saying, I didn't carry my child, please have no fear. You know, you've given me hope that I'm going to try IVF again. You know, please tell me how you managed to have the eggs harvested, how you found each other, how you. And it was just wonderful. And we realized that actually it was a story of hope, not just for people like us, but for people across the board. I think if people thought, you know, well, if those two, against all the odds, and a pandemic, can have their baby, then there's hope for me as well. And, you know, what an amazing position to be in that we were able to do that.
Yeah, it was very moving and empowering reading all those messages from those women. And what it actually made me feel good about myself in so many ways, because there's so many women talking about their own fertility journeys, some of them very negative, some of them negative that turned into positive, and some that were just early days, and it was a real mix. But what it showed me was that, you know, there's so many women out there who don't have your picture perfect, you know, simple process of having a kid. I had my hang-ups because I thought, you know, it was all about me being trans. Actually, there is so much in common with so many women out there who have gone through their own version of, you know, infertility and ways to have a child, whether it be through IVF, surrogacy, adoption, whatever it is. And it was just, I do think that as a society, we should talk more about the different ways people have children, about, you know, infertility journeys, because so many people go through those issues in silence and they really feel like they're alone. And it took something like a documentary for people to reach out and say, actually, that's like me too. And I promise you, just the thousands of people who message me, like, there'll be many, many more than that. And I think we should all be talking about it a little bit more.
I completely agree. I end each episode of the podcast with you finishing 3 sentences. So the first one, so Hannah, we can start with you. Being a mum means? Being a mum means
love, unconditionally, unwaveringly, going with the flow, just being there, whatever happens.
And Jake, being a dad means?
A dream come true.
The next sentence is, well, the start of it is, since having children, I
have not slept beyond 7:30 in the morning.
Jake?
Since having children, I have changed a lot of nappies.
And finally, I'm happy when?
Millie's happy.
I'm happy when I go in the mornings and she's had a full 12 hours of sleep and she looks up at me and there's big eyes and just smiles and puts her hands up. Yeah.
Aww. Guys, thank you so much. It was so lovely talking to you both. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.